So, welcome everybody. My name is David Edelson. I'm the virtual Dinesh today, and for today's Enterprise Neurosystem webinar, which appreciate everybody joining, I have one of my great colleagues from IBM, Gerald Coon, who's going to talk about the deployment of AI ML at the edge. So thanks very much. We may have another one of our colleagues joining if he has time, but thanks very much, Gerald, for coming this week and giving us this great presentation insight. So please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And thank you everybody for the opportunity to present today on the experience that we had in a project we were working with on IBM. Dinesh invited Utpal and I to talk about something that we thought would be relevant to this. And when we batted around the idea, I realized there was a project I had worked on within the last 6 months where I had an artificial intelligence and machine learning application. It was actually an IBM service that we were putting together a package for to put out at the edge, and we had to put a whole bunch of the stack together to make a project out of it, to make a solution out of it rather. And when we discussed it, it was like, this is very relevant to the AI and ML presentation group that Dinesh has been leading. We should come talk about like how we solve this problem. Obviously, this is not the only way to solve this problem. I just thought because of what it does, it would be very exciting and relevant to what this team does. So if I can get my next slide to go. So, there we go. So here's what we were doing. An IBM service came to us, and we did this for more than just one IBM service, but it started off with one very specific artificial intelligence and machine learning service that said, we want to make a whole solution in a box that we could ship to a customer and do this IBM service. We obviously are an AIM application. We'd like some very serious GPUs with very high CUDA cores to be able to serve this up. But we don't want to have a tie-in to a specific hardware vendor. We really would like as simple as possible from a management perspective. We have just the application and we know we need GPU. IBM acquired Red Hat a while back, and we have been standardizing all of the IBM services on OpenShift. So there was no question about OpenShift being in the mix. And then we had the artificial intelligence code that we needed to run on there. I am involved in this conversation at all because of IBM Cloud Satellite, which is IBM Cloud Services solution to take our technologies in IBM Cloud and put them in other places outside of IBM Cloud. One of the services that we can create is OpenShift. It's not the only way to get OpenShift, but it is one way to get OpenShift. And in this particular project, I put on here the challenges. If anybody is working on anything with AI and ML, once you get management excited about doing the artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff, the next question is always, how quickly can you put it out there? So I included this quote attributed to Miles Davis, though I didn't validate that time isn't the main thing, it's the only thing. And this project was absolutely no exception. We wanted to know how quickly we could create this whole stack of a solution that we could put out there. And that's why IBM Cloud Satellite was a part of it. I'll talk more about the differences between the two. I do see Utpal is joining. Did you make it on, Utpal?
I did, Gerald. Good afternoon.
So I was just talking about the project in specific. It's very easy for me, since we're going to be talking about deploying all of this stuff at the edge, to have you kind of articulate our perspective on the edge, if you want me to do that, or do you want to wait towards the end?
No, that's fine. Happy to do that. Just let me know when. Yeah, I can do that right now. So team, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for listening in and joining. Obviously, from an edge standpoint, it is a critical area for IBM as a company. At a high level, you can strategize or compartmentalize edge into three categories or buckets, if you will. We call it the network edge, we call it the near edge, and then the third one is the far edge. And as a company, we are more interested and more focused on the network edge and the near edge, because far edge basically means millions and millions of devices out there which leverage or connect to the near edge or the network edge. IBM assets are linked to these edges from a network edge and a near edge perspective. And as 5G is getting the spread of 5G is getting prevalent, greater bandwidth, low latency, and creation of network slicing is leading to more use cases across all the industries. One of the biggest assets we have is our managed OpenShift, which allows you to deploy a solution and use it anywhere. Could be on-prem, could be on top of a cloud, and it can be at the edge. One of the advantages, speaking from an IBM Cloud standpoint, is a product called Cloud Satellite, which is a managed OpenShift offering and is being used at the edge. And the reason why it's being used at the edge is because, again, back to the original point, that managed OpenShift on Cloud Satellite can be deployed anywhere. In fact, since it's a truly hybrid cloud, you can even deploy it on top of a competitive hyperscaler, AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. But on the edge, it's being used because you can now deploy it on the shop floor, you can deploy it on the parking lot, you can deploy it in the network circles that the carriers are creating to provide stuff very close to the end customer. And if you run cloud packs or AI models or things like Maximo visual inspection over there, a lot of those calculations and modeling happens right there. Next slide, Gerald. I'll be quick in the interest of time. Some of the use cases from an edge standpoint that we see prevalent across industries are captured in the top 10 over here. That doesn't mean that these are the only use cases. Conceptually, theoretically, and in terms of one-off, there are hundreds of use cases. But when we are focused on marketing and selling at scale, we prefer to use use cases that have been deployed, which can be replicable, which can be scaled, and you quickly start seeing a pattern which gets emerged over here. And the pattern that is emerging over here is the usage of edge use cases in automotive industries, in industrial, shop floors, in manufacturing is a lot more prevalent today than in some of the other industries, maybe like financial services. One of the most common use cases that we see is quality inspection on the shop floor. And that's leveraging our Maximo visual inspection product, which can be deployed on the edge, and it enhances the visual inspection capabilities. And you can think about it, it can be done anywhere. We are doing it with companies in the manufacturing space, in the automotive space, in the industrial space. The other one that you see, again, that can also go and get expanded in the utilities industry. And obviously the telcos are the enablers. They may not use it, but they use that to sell through their B2B offering to monetize the use cases. Next slide, Gerald. Again, as I was talking about it, this is the way you get a breakdown from a product standpoint. Obviously, we are showing an IBM product, but being a hybrid company, you know, it can be a mix and match if the client wants to use the products of some of the other partners, if you will. So this is just a small snapshot of the way some of these use cases are delivered. And if you look at the IBM stacking, it's just amazing because it brings in the infrastructure layer from a cloud standpoint. It brings in the Red Hat It brings in the IBM software stack. And then obviously from a services standpoint, we leverage our expert labs to deploy it, client engineering in the pre-sales, and in many cases, IBM consulting from a broader implementation and integration to the back end of the customer's application suite. With that, back to you, Gerald.
Thank you, Utpal. And I thought it was really important for Utpal to articulate what we see as the edge, because in the conversations I've had with people about edge, there's a lot of confusion. That word is almost as ambiguous in some places as cloud used to be. So I really appreciate, Utpal, you laying out our perspective on edge and what these actual businesses look like that are trying to accomplish things. And I feel like the satellite use case we're talking about, one of these services, was designed to take that and put it out in these remote locations, in a branch office's manager's office, not a traditional data center, and new places. So Utpal hit at a very high level the difference between IBM Cloud Satellite. The very first thing I want to say is we love Red Hat OpenShift, and there is no point that IBM Cloud Satellite is in any way trying to compete with Red Hat OpenShift. Red Hat OpenShift is an incredible way, depending on what your use case is, to have Operator Hub, which has resources in Operator Hub like the NVIDIA driver that I'm going to talk about, container management software, security solutions, the storage ecosystem. There is a ton of stuff in Red Hat OpenShift. And the IBM Cloud Satellite service that I'm going to talk about today was put together to take IBM Cloud services that would probably be important for what you're doing, like an IBM Cloud database. You need Postgres, for example, or a MongoDB, where you can stack on some additional hosts, very agnostic to what the hosts look like. This can be AWS EC2 instances. This can be VMware hosts. Of course, we have documentation that talks about like what our CPU and memory expectations are and the latency to communicate with each other, but they are entirely agnostic to the platform. I think it's really important to say that what we're talking about doing here, the IBM Cloud Satellite, the way I'm going to talk about it today, was just deploying the Red Hat OpenShift software so that a container application could also run on those Red Hat OpenShift workers and take advantage of GPUs, which are extremely important in artificial intelligence. So how long did it take? I think that's a really important thing. You need to know your time expectation. And when I'm talking about using IBM Cloud Satellite, I like to use the cooking metaphor of, there's the time that it takes to type in the commands, which I call the prep time. There's the time that it takes to wait for those commands to complete, the cook time. Like, you put the food in the oven and you're waiting for it to finish. And then there's like the entire experience, which I'm calling the plating. So the user experience section could take a bit longer. For this specific project, when we got finished with it, we had the whole flow where the actual person typing on the keyboard, when they were mixing it in with their other work, was less than an hour of their actual time in typing commands, which I think is really important because everybody has time as a resource, and the engineers who are going to be smart people doing this. The cook time, it's a couple of hours, with no problems in there, or even with some problems in there. I think it can be accomplished in one day. I think that's really important because, you need to know how long is it going to take to finish this, to have an OpenShift that I can hand these NVIDIA GPU drivers up to my application. And then, of course, how long your individual UX to do this would take is really dependent on how you want to present this to an end customer. So let's get into some technical specifics. This is the part that I felt would be really, really valuable. I like to think about this from the perspective of, if I could go back and talk to Gerald that had to do this at the beginning, what's the one thing Gerald wishes he knew that would have made all of this a whole lot easier? And I'll actually show it to you on the next two slides as we dig deeper into the technical stuff. we had to pick the server hardware, and we had on the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see we had to align these versions. So you pick the hardware that NVIDIA supports from a GPU perspective. You have to identify the specific NVIDIA GPU driver. You have to think about what the host operating system is. And if you've got a hypervisor in there, I even mentioned that one here in a few minutes. The guest container platform, which I'm using CoreOS. I'm using a OpenShift container platform, OCP, as the container platform. And then I've got my application that's going to be running on top of all of this that needs the GPU way down at the bottom of this whole stack. Satellite was I included on the bottom right. This particular project, what we worked with, I actually have a version of the Intel NUCs that we've used for a lot of these demonstrations behind me. They're just, almost desktop sized computers. And the one behind me actually is an actual satellite location with 3 control planes and 1 single node OpenShift for demonstration purposes. Normally, when you deploy this in production, we want more control plane for redundancy and to be able to do what it does to roll out all of the services. And I don't think you'd ever have just one OpenShift worker with absolutely no redundancy if you were going to use this in a production kind of way. But it can be handy for this. All right, so on the right-hand side of the screen, I have a page that it's a screenshot of a page that I had to use that I found really interesting, and it was where I got the specific number that wound up being like one of the critical steps in all of this. With IBM Cloud Satellite, at the time I was doing this project, we were using RHEL 7. That project has moved on and started using RHEL 8. But I was using RHEL 7 with the GPU I mentioned there, the NVIDIA A100. Of course, we wanted OpenShift, and our application was going to run on OpenShift. There was actually even KVM in the mix with how we were doing this for virtualization, because we had a constraint that we put on the project to start with, where we didn't want to use as many hosts as Satellite required. So we wanted to buy some bigger hosts and put a virtualization layer on there. And so surfacing the GPU through that hardware, making sure it was compatible with the hardware, pushing it through KVM up into OpenShift, having OpenShift offer that all the way up where my application running on OpenShift could see it. Again, I'm trying to get to the point where Gerald is going to show you guys the one piece that I wish I knew. So if you haven't worked on this before, OpenShift and Operator Hub has great integration with NVIDIA's node feature discovery and the driver itself. And node feature discovery is exactly what it sounds like. It's intended to take and find out what piece of hardware has the unique hardware requirements that you required. So my first critical note that I wish I had known before starting all of this, it's very well documented from NVIDIA, but I'm going to show you where to put that in some places, was where do you actually say this is the host that has the GPU that I'm going to need to use? It is a feature of the individual nodes inside of OpenShift, and I have listed there the actual tag that you need to put on that node in order to say this is the one. And the screenshots on the right are my actual screenshots of the NVIDIA driver running on there successfully. And you can see in the bottom one, the NVIDIA GPU that showed up on the host when we had the driver configured correctly. So I thought that was pretty important, and there's some good NVIDIA documentation to make it all the way through this. But here's where I really got stuck. And if you take one thing away from this from a technical perspective, this is the one that I hope you'll screenshot or come back and look at this at some point. The stuff on the right-hand side is the YAML version of deploying the driver. And the repository name syntax is not explicitly articulated in the NVIDIA documentation, nor is the image name, I think, driver, at the time that I looked at it, wasn't listed out there. And I had no idea what number to put in there. So I wound up understanding what I needed to understand to configure through all of the layers to expose this NVIDIA GPU, but I didn't know what to put in the NVIDIA driver that I was pulling from Operator Hub to get it to work. I want to flip back for just a second, and the screenshot on the right-hand side is critically important. I include, of course, the NVIDIA page that I pulled this from. This one's fairly easy to get to. And you'll see I typed in rel as the search tag that I did. That may be very small writing, and I apologize if it's too small to see. Just trust me, when you get to the NVIDIA GPU driver, there's a place where you can do a search. And you'll see when I typed either rel or if I type CoreOS on another screenshot, it'll show me all of the version numbers that are important. If I'm running rel 7.9, which hopefully you aren't anymore, rel 7 is kind of old at this point, this is the version number of the driver that you would want to put in the OpenShift configuration YAML that I'm showing you here on the other slide. If you're running CoreOS, there is a different version number, and that is very, very critical to be successful with this. So having put in my configuration 450/8002, which aligned to the Red Hat version that I used, I had my node tagged with which one had the GPU inside of it. I got to the place where, if you look on the left-hand side of this slide, I had my GPU passed through the hypervisor, which for me was KVM. CoreOS or RHEL is what Satellite supports for the operating system of the hosts that you bring to the party. And then you can assign it to whatever role you want, the control plane or IBM Cloud Databases or OpenShift if you want some of these hosts to be OpenShift. And then you can layer on top of that worker the artificial intelligence or machine learning application that you're trying to use this GPU with. It sounds simple when I put it on a slide like this. Anyone who's actually tried to do this and get it accomplished within a day or to make a package out of this can understand coming up with a solution that works on Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, VMware, KVM, or even bare metal servers. I even include in the hypervisors right there. You don't have to have a hypervisor. You know, the NUCs that I'm using back over here behind me, there is no hypervisor on top of them. We just stack additional NUCs up. And I thought that implication would show that it's really easy, right? The simple section right here to put it out there, that the hardware itself can run where it matters at the edge. So I can have this database that my application needs to write to running as an additional service on some additional hosts right there. And it's a smaller footprint, which I think helps make it more sustainable. It's only sized for what I actually need to do right there. And it's still a managed service, so that's supposed to make it easier. And we tried to keep this presentation pretty short because I had thought and hoped, PowerPoint is not my favorite way to interact with folks, that we could turn it over to having a discussion or any questions that one might have about our project and our process to do this. So David, I don't know if you guys normally have a chat that you normally pull that through, but this was the part where I was hoping we could turn it into a discussion.
Okay, great, Gerald. Thanks very much for that very insightful presentation about IBM's AI support and OCP and OpenShift. So please open it up. Anybody else have any questions, want any further information about how this all works?
So, hi Gerald, this is Ravi here from Reliance Geo.
Hi, Ravi.
Hey, I saw the presentation. I was there from the beginning. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, this whole combo of IBM Cloud Satellite, it was kind of a little bit, it confused me in the beginning for me, because I realized like the way Microsoft did their satellite Earth station and then the cloudification based on that for non-terrestrial networks. So in the beginning, based on the name, I was confused a bit, but now I get it better. So the question for you is that you have shown Arial 100 as the baseline for all the AI/ML.
No. I do want to be clear that A100 was just for that project, the GPU that they chose to run on the hardware that was there. This was in no way restricted or limited to that NVIDIA GPU. That was just the project that I was working on, the specifics.
Okay, good to know that. So, like in your kind of contribution to the industry, can you throw some light, if possible, what exactly is happening in the world of device edge or the customer premise edge? Are you seeing some activity over there as well? and what kind of businesses enabling device edge and customer premise edge for you, if you're seeing any?
So I'm gonna flip over to the slide that Utpal, and I'm this is why I had Utpal present what he presented about what our experience is. This is based on our experience of what the edge actually looks for. And all of these use cases, the cross-industry use cases we're talking about, are not hypothetical. This is IBM's actual experience talking to real people in these industries about solving those specific problems at the edge. And I need to understand a little bit better which region we're talking about, because what we see as equipment that shows up in, like, and I'll look on the right hand side in the middle at the 5G network, is very specific to that industry and who are the leaders in that industry for managing equipment and hardware and, you know, requirements even, to like picking something on the left hand side where any individual manufacturing group may have a different set of hardware and expectations for what that software is going to do and the type of outcome that they're trying to have. So can you help narrow me down into, like,
Hey, Gerald.
which of these we're talking about?
Hey, Gerald, this is John. Is anybody else seeing stuff on the screen? I'm not.
Yeah, it's blank.
Oh.
It's blank.
It's
Is
a
that
white
a-
screen. We only
Thanks
see
for
a
pointing
white
it out,
box.
John. so, so, so let me make it a little bit more clear, since you talked about 5G and then the whole infrastructure is based on a wireless network, a terrestrial network, hopefully. So in that case, I was curious. You said that on one side you do have Red Hat and a real-time OS, and on the top of it you have OpenShift, and then on the top of it you do have your consulting services. Once, like, you have your network function as a service loaded.
I think you're
I
talking
would
about
just-
this slide. Can you see this slide now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
So I was just interested to understand a little bit more, like your services, how exactly it is a little different from the standard Red Hat services, because you know that now Nokia has also announced to go directly
Yes.
to Red Hat, which is a very good thing, and congratulations to all of you being the part of Red Hat as well. But IBM services, like, do they always work hand in hand with all Red Hat kind of layers at the bottom, or you also do with some of the other kind of taste and other frameworks as well, like Wind River or VMware as well?
Well, I don't want to speak for Red Hat. I mean, I want to be very clear. I can only really speak from the IBM perspective. But I can tell you with 100% confidence from the IBM perspective that the IBM global reach and the relationship into many of these fields extends far, far beyond just a technical relationship, right? You know, the Industry 4.0 service line over here for the manufacturing companies allows us to a much deeper connection with those people. So I don't think I can give you a one answer to what you're asking me, because it really depends on the project for the company that we're working with. If they have the skills in-house to manage that, or if they have an existing relationship with IBM or Red Hat, I think that's going to help them decide whether they would want to leverage IBM for some of the consulting services that are listed over on the right-hand side here, establish a new relationship with IBM or Red Hat as the case is appropriate, and then get the global coverage that they need, right? So I think it's going to depend on that particular business and industry and what they have committed. I haven't seen any of them at all, where we started the conversation and there was nothing installed whatsoever, right? People either already have a relationship with Red Hat, they already have even a hypervisor vendor, right? Like I'm an AWS or an Azure company. Two of the ones I'm working with are Azure and Google companies. So they picked their platform, and that kind of informs and decides which of the services between IBM and Red Hat are going to offer. The main reason I put this slide in here was, you know, if you can do everything that you want with the Red Hat OpenShift suite, and you have a relationship with Red Hat to accomplish all of those, I think, IBM's view on that is do it. Like, that's great. Absolutely. We have additional services, and I didn't include quantum computing, but as we get into the higher order, different types of databases, or key protect and hyper protect crypto services, and quantum technology, there may be some additional services that you'd like to bring alongside your AI and ML application that you're trying to deploy out there. And satellite might be more appropriate because we make it very easy to put that on the exact same hardware in the exact same location as a managed service.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your answer.
Ravi, you're also kind of more intrigued about what I think they would want to call far edge or the network edge from the point of view of, this universe. Is that the nature of the question, if I'm tracking?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah,
Wanna-
since NVIDIA was referred from the beginning, that's why I thought that let me ask something which is relevant to that framework as well. But now I understand, it's all about the services what IBM can provide on the top of, you can say, network as a service.
Right.
So that is something he is trying to kind of explain. So it's clear to me. I was also interested to know that even when you work with the software as a service framework at the top, do you also see the trend is also going towards a device edge or customer premise edge as well? But again, like we are talking about something which is deployed and something which is trialed or which is evolving. It's not the area we will be covering. So that's fine. I think just I wanted to get some details if possible, but I got some of those answers as well. Thank you.
Yeah, you use a very interesting word, trend, and IBM is a really big company. I think it's really difficult to say what a trend looks like because we have many of the conversations with many different industries. I really cannot express how big it is, that I don't know that we've drawn specific trends, but we're trying to align with all of our customers and meet their needs wherever they are. So I don't see like this groundswell of a specific network edge, edge on premise, or near edge or far edge that's listed in these slides. I think Utpal has a whole lot more conversations with customers out in the world that can say that with better authority, but he had to drop for another meeting.
No, I just joined, Gerald.
There you go.
If you can just summarize the question for me.
So the question is, what do we see as the trend of people moving towards network edge, and far edge from IBM's perspective? Did I catch that right, Ravi? I'll let you restate the question.
No, actually, I like we are dealing with those kind of things for the last 5-6 years, so that is not the question or interest.
Okay.
The interest is we are going further south. So when we are going further south, two things we have shown. One is NVIDIA A100 that tells you that you are also moving towards a abstraction and acceleration layer, which is called AAL in our world, in telco world. So that is one. Then the second piece is when you are moving from a host-based telco edge, or you can say that the near edge, if you're moving from there to a co-host based infrastructure, what AAL is saying, which is going to be a major enabler for 6G from 5G, do you also see a trend that it is coming further down the whole framework of AAL and anything and everything in that regard from 5G further going down to 6G in terms of device edge or customer premise edge? Because all of what we'll be going to have in coming 3-4 years down the line related to XRs, mixed reality, as well as metaverse, as well as 3D communication, and many more I can keep on telling. In all those areas, the device edge is going to play a big role. And I know that Red Hat is the most accepted kind of platform, how that is evolving. But I also know that this talk is going to be about IBM Cloud, but you guys work mix and match on both sides. So I was just kind of interested to understand how you're seeing a trend. And for us, trend is important. Just wanted to emphasize, because we are open source initiative. So for us, getting the trend and working in that regard is very important. That is the reason I asked.
So the answer to your question, Ravi, the simple answer to your question is yes. And actually, you answered your question yourself. So are we seeing a trend? Yes. Is it going to be in exactly those areas that you mentioned? Yes. Are there some limitations that obviously 5G has because of the use cases? Yes, and that's why 6G will come and take care of a lot of those. So we can take and talk more in detail offline, but the simple answer to your question, which you answered, we are seeing the same trends.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
How is the integration work happening between all these various layers and owners? Because I can see where the 4G 5G owners are providing certain services. I can see applications being delivered and written by different people for the edge devices, but the data from those for doing things like the machine learning component on the back end has to integrate those edge devices data to the back end pieces. So there's a lot of different owners in different places and different functions, all supposed to be sort of integrating together in a secure way. What have you seen there?
I'm happy to take that one up, Paul, or if you want to, you can as well.
Yeah, I can take a first cut at it. Actually, we do this thing with our clients on a regular basis. And William, your question is very valid. It requires a truly hybrid environment in the sense that you need everybody to come together. And there are instances where some of our partners say, I got it covered, I will handle it. But when we go into the implementation stage, we realize that they don't have it fully covered. So the answer to your question is, and without giving names, this requires working with carriers. This requires working with data center companies, if it's somebody different than a carrier in a particular situation, depending on which edge we are talking about. It requires working with, network orchestrator or cloud orchestrator companies. It requires working with the software. And in some cases, it also requires working with the device company which is providing. So in many of these situations, the SI work becomes very critical. Either the end company, which is asking for it, if they have a strong SI service or they're currently contracted to somebody, they become the prime on this. And then in some cases, the telcos tend to become the prime on this if this is being delivered through a B2B service. Obviously, companies like our IBM Consulting and other SIs are also very well experienced to do this. But it does require a combination of few vendors coming together to do this.
Is there any sort of drive towards standardization? I could see this would be a great area for standardization around some of these interfaces and things like that. Is there any effort to do that we're seeing?
I think that we look at it from a use case standpoint. In terms of a use case standpoint, I'm not aware of any standardization. Obviously, there is standardization in terms of the controls between cloud and the telcos, but I'm personally not seeing any specific from a use case standpoint.
I think I would second what you're saying there, Paul. IBM prides itself on design thinking, and the core of design thinking is let's take the problem and the experience and the type of role that we're trying to create the solution for and meet them where they are and solve that specific problem. If there is a standardization, I'll give you some hope here. The reason we're sharing like the OpenShift OpenShift and the containerization is we do see some pretty consistent, modern companies and customers understand the value of microservices and containerization. And we're continuing to align with that where that's allowed. And I also think it's really important. I still have the slide up that Utpal put up there of our key focus. We've drawn a circle over providing the services out there for that far edge. And that allows us to say that there's a kind of a standardization of microservices, containerization, OpenShift even from our perspective, to provide the services for the far edge. I don't know that we can do much more without getting into the specifics of individual customers and use cases, though, at the far edge.
Gerald and William and Paul, can I jump in for a second? So if I just want to make sure I'm tracking something that Ravi said, and I think you all agreed, your all's view is that as a trend, and I think Paul, you said this also, as a trend, that the higher order services provided, from, let's just say, the far right, the clouds, that everything is compressing ever increasingly toward the edge. Everyone is saying that, right?
Right.
And that being the case, then William, if I'm tracking where you're going, hi, haven't seen you in a while. If that's going, at some point there will be, standardization will necessarily follow because of the plurality of devices, of far edge devices, as a function of making these services ubiquitous. You'll have to have ways that everybody can participate, right? This is a common thing that happens in every generation of computing. And that IBM's position, I'm trying to track this to make sure I'm tracking, right? IBM's position is you're looking for the opportunities that are in the what you have your circle, the network edge and the edge node on premise is kind of where you all are focusing, but you're recognizing that it's moving the other direction. And to the degree that becomes a more viable market, then you would extend your services left on this picture. Is that a correct tracking of how you're viewing the world?
I want to immediately say we wouldn't call it viable. I don't want to lend ourselves to disruptiveness, right? It's not that we think that there's an unviable market on the left-hand side. The important word is maybe more mature, or even the consistency that we're talking about here,
Right.
that says that we're not chasing after one-offs and individual people that are trying to take over that far left. It's a very viable market, though, that's still evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say too is that while we're looking at taking advantage of Kubernetes and OpenShift there for portability of the workloads,
Exactly.
I think at some point there's going to be a need for standardization around the integration of the different providers within this complex network, and that need will evolve. Like,
well, that's Ravi's position, right? That's
right.
Ravi's, implicit position about this. Reliance Geo, they're just this really tall, tiny little non-significant telco, and my joke should be clear to everybody, right? They're having to deal with this right this second, is my imagination on this, and therefore they're thinking about how this would mature. I think your idea of a maturing market makes great sense. I'd like to retract that from the history of what I said and use your words. That's super interesting.
Evolving and maturing are better words.
Yeah.
These are great questions. Other questions. This is the part I was looking forward to. I hate killing people with PowerPoint. I like having the conversation.
If you permit me, I will also be interested to know about the controller side of it, because one is your network as a service domain orchestrator. Another one is service orchestrator. And then the third one, a hybrid, is developing nowadays, since I'm also the part of ORAN initiative as well. So the third one is multi-service SMO, or service management orchestration. So how do you think that IBM is keeping a track of that evolution? I know that you are more interested to mature the solution the industry can have, which is a fantastic contribution. But how do you see that, once you start with, because I remember when the cloudification started probably 5-6 years with the telco, they always had from VM to containers to Kubernetes, and then their own version of Kubernetes. But then again, the time came where the observability, CI/CD, and others, like companies came with their own controllers or domain orchestrators. People use different names, but in telcos, They're always called SMO, Service Management Orchestration pieces, where ORAN has come up with the whole standardization pieces, whatever we could have, called OCloud, and then O1 and O2 interfaces. There are multiple telco guys here, I can see that. So definitely we're trying to standardize whatever we can from the telco perspective, but from the service perspective, I think the third layer, which is like end-to-end orchestration, is evolving, where like your network as a service orchestration and the applications and service orchestration will be managed by the same platform. And since you guys are sitting at the top, always customizing like Industry 4.0 I saw and multiple others, do you also see a need where the network connectivity or the infrastructure management orchestration and then the application management orchestration are going together one day, or at present you are seeing a customized version of it, even if it is non-standard?
I think you ask an incredible question, and I'm really excited to answer about the stuff that we have out there publicly about the direction that I see this going. I believe two things are driving consistency in what we're going to see evolve and what you're talking about. Number one, I think security has proven to evolve and understand the new challenges of containers and continue to be evolving in their expectations of what you're doing for boundaries and controlling what can talk to what. And if you look at like some of our research stuff that's out there right now about standardizing on how you report that, one of the projects is called Compass, I know, that a group is putting out there about how you get consistent of showing what is all of the compliance of all of the stuff across all of these things that's going to drive it. And the second part, and Utpal could probably say a whole lot more about this than I could, sovereignty is front and center of the conversation right now, which is, okay, it's great that you can solve problem A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, depending on where you are on the infrastructure, but I really need to be sure that you are operating under the laws of this particular country, which means your services have to be run out of this particular country. And then that means we're going to have to further articulate, are the services running in that particular location to get towards exactly what you were talking about. The consistency in networking, in my view, is coming from, they are at their today place of what networking technologies that they use, but security and sovereignty are driving the direction that they're trying to go. And that's aligning to how they pick what's going to help them get that.
Thank you very much for your answer. I also just wanted to inform everyone, since the IBM architects are there, that probably in a couple of weeks, within the 6G initiative in Oren Alliance called NGRG, we are starting a new research stream, which is called the Next Generation Edge Infra. So if you guys are interested, like I would like to invite your team or Red Hat team, Bill, since you are also there, because I have got close to 5 or 6 major companies are supporting it. So because someone asked about the standardization as well for 6G initiative for Edge Infra or the next generation infra, which is a kind of combo for both connectivity and services. So if there is anyone who is really interested to be a mover and shaker for the industry, they all are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. This is really exciting. And for those of you who don't know, Ravi is a Vice President of Technology at Reliance and is pretty much leading the ORAN 6G research efforts. So that's a great invitation and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
All right. I hope this was useful for everyone. If you think up any other questions, Utpal and I are both on LinkedIn, and it's a great way to get a hold of us. And I know this is going to be posted to YouTube. You can ask questions there, I guess.
That's very great. No, thanks very much, Gerald and Utpal, for participating, for giving this great presentation and insight into this trajectory for IBM. So thanks very much, and for the great questions that we've had from Ravi and others. It's been a great discussion, great conversation.
Yeah, and team, just in closing, Gerald and I, we live, eat, and breathe Edge on a regular basis. The stuff that we presented is what we do on a regular basis. So happy to answer any question. If you're from IBM, you can just reach out by Slack. If you're not from IBM, Gerald and I will just put our email ID on the link here. You can reach out anytime, and to our Reliance friends, we'll take you up on that offer, and we'll be happy to participate with you on this.
Terrific. It's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So thanks very much, and great to be able to use this sort of forum to initiate these types of collaborations across companies in the industry. So that's fantastic. So just one more chance if anybody have any other questions, and thanks for a very great, exciting presentation, insights into this, and thanks for participating with the Enterprise Neurosystems webinar this week. So thanks everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon, wonderful rest of the week.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.